Mr. Spock is a half-human, half-Vulcan character on Star Trek who is defined by logic, stoicism, and the pursuit of knowledge. So not only does EPOC rhyme with Spock, but much like how Mr. Spock operates, the principles of EPOC follow a very logical sequence. I chose this topic because it's a concept that I'm personally aware of and use twice a week at my inline speed skating practices, but I will explain that further in the practical segment at the end of the video. So EPOC stands for excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, and it's also known as the afterburn effect. In simple terms, it is the increased use of oxygen and calories after you stop exercising. It represents the energy that the body uses to recover, repair, and return to its resting state. A good analogy would be comparing it to the heat of a car's engine, how after you turn your car off, the engine stays warm for a while. After exercise, VO2 remains elevated and the body consumes more oxygen than it needs to survive. It was first proposed that this serves to replenish the oxygen deficit that occurs at the beginning of exercise. But we now understand that this afterburn serves several purposes. So there are two phases of EPOC, a fast component and a slow component, and each phase serves a different purpose. The fast phase, which accounts for approximately 20% of the oxygen consumed, serves to replenish energy stores by resynthesizing ATP and phosphocreatine. This also reoxygenates hemoglobin in the blood and myoglobin in muscle tissues. The slow phase consists of four main processes. Lactate is cleared and transported to the liver, where it's converted to glucose. Body temperature cools down and is returned to homeostasis. Heart rate and ventilation rate slows down, and the hormones of epinephrine and norepinephrine recalibrate to the resting state. Key factors that influence EPOC are exercise intensity, exercise duration, and mode of exercise. And the effects of these factors are intuitive and logical. Exercise intensity is the primary factor influencing EPOC and has a curvilinear relationship with it. As exercise intensity increases, the magnitude and duration of EPOC increases exponentially. So high intensity training and heavy resistance training creates a greater oxygen deficit and more lactate accumulation, increases of body temperature and heart rate. So it takes more energy to restore it to its resting conditions, or to restore the body to its resting conditions. Exercise duration has a more linear relationship to EPOC, where longer sustained exercise results in a prolonged EPOC, and shorter training sessions will have reduced recovery times. So, for example, a 90-minute bicycle ride will have a longer EPOC period than a 10-minute ride. Additionally, different modes of exercise create different recovery demands, which follows the similar logical trend as the levels of intensity. So, for example, high intensity training, such as sprint intervals, will create a largest EPOC with the highest magnitude and recovery period. Resistance training, like heavy squats, deadlifts, or power cleans, creates a moderate to high EPOC, and steady state endurance, or the classic zone 2 training, like a 30-minute light jog at 50% VO2 max, produces minimal lactate accumulation, it's low hormonal stress, so they will have the lowest and shortest EPOC. So it's all very logical and intuitive. So to answer the question if one form of EPOC is better or worse than the other, in my opinion, you can't really label EPOC after high intensity exercise as better or worse than EPOC after a steady state endurance exercise because they represent recovery from two distinctly different physiological demands. It's like comparing apples to oranges. The magnitude of EPOC is a reflection of the workout's intensity and not really a measure of the recovery quality. But on that note, an athlete might be able to maximize their EPOC period with nutrition, hydration, and rest. So, regarding the question about energy expenditure and substrate utilization, EPOC relates to energy expenditure post exercise in that it contributes to the total calories burned from a workout session. So, for example, if I burned 850 calories over 2 hours at my speed skating practice, my body might burn an extra 80 calories throughout the night as I drive home and eat dinner, take a shower, do my homework, go to bed. And also, during this recovery period, my body will shift towards using fat as a primary fuel source, which could continue for another 2 to 3 hours. But a misconception is that this afterburn effect is significant and can help with weight loss. But the amount of extra calories burned is trivial and is spent on restoring the body back to homeostasis. So just because I burned 850 calories does not give me a free ticket to pig out on Big Mac, filet of fish, quarter pounder French fries, icy Coke, thick shake sundaes, and apple pies at McDonald's for the rest of the week. So I am going to use my own experience as an inline speed skater to demonstrate how I use EPOC as a practical tool. So although I mentioned how the afterburn can last several hours, I use the principles of EPOC in an acute or short-term manner. So at skate practice, we begin with a 20 to 30 minute pace line. It starts out pretty slow, but gradually increases in speed and intensity. And eventually, I can no longer keep up with the elite men that I'm skating with, and I have to drop out. So instead of stopping completely and sitting down, which I do have the option to do, I'll keep skating around at a light intensity, even after the pace line is finished. And I've been doing this ever since I first learned about EPOC in 2024. And I know this is going to solidify my status as a nerd and a dork. But I actually say EPOC in my mind a few times as I'm cooling down and skating around. And I'm imagining all the positive effects this excess oxygen is having on my body. So I don't get as specific as saying the lactate is clearing my body or my hormones are stabilizing now. I don't do that. But I do imagine the oxygen supplying my heart, lungs, and muscles. And since our practices are 2 hours long, performing this light recovery helps prepare my body as much as possible for the rest of practice. I would like to educate my coaches and team members about this concept because one thing that's for sure that happens when we're skating is the metabolic burn that we feel in our lower back and legs, but specifically our quads. And it becomes harder and harder to lift our skates to the point where we have to stop. And with practices being 2 hours long, it's impossible to remain fresh the entire time. So while we might attempt to give 100% for effort for each drill, the output might be 80% or 70% or even less as practice progresses. But if there's a better way to promote lactate clearance, restore energy, and reset the nervous system using the principles of EPOC, it seems that it would benefit each skater and the team as a whole and maximize the effectiveness of each practice. I know that for coaches, every minute of practice time is valuable. And even if they've been doing something the same way year after year, it might be difficult to change or incorporate new ideas. However, I hope we can stay open to small evidence based changes that may help athletes train smarter and recover faster. So, and like Mr. Spock would say, live long and prosper. Thank you.